So let me just kind of first of all say thank you to Sophion for making this happen. We really could not do that without you all. So thank you very much. Peter, before we jump into the conversation, which I'm excited to have, let's just if you could just take a minute and just give people kind of a quick pitch on what Sophion is, and then we can jump into the conversation here today.
Thank you, yes. So it says technology for innovation's sake. So that's what I do, that's what my company does. We create technology for innovation. And it's for innovation management. Innovation is a business process. And yet, if you are an entrepreneur working in your garage, this won't be an issue. But you get big enough and you have accounts payable, you have accounts receivable, you have innovation. All those things have to be managed. So we help companies to manage the innovation business process.
Awesome. And so when we met and we were kind of talking about this theme, right, the title of the talk that we came up with is White Belt Moves Matter. And I think kind of started thinking about this more in the context of warning companies against so-called kind of black belt technology and black belt techniques. Could you talk a little bit about what you mean by black belt techniques?
Yeah. When I was much younger, I did martial arts. And the only thing I remember, and it stuck with me, is what the sensei said, look, once you get to black belt, what you do is go and study white belt and white belt moves again, because that's what the value is. So all the sophisticated kicks and flips, that's fine, but at the end you gotta punch somebody in the face, correct, in the groin, or block something. So 20% of the moves you learn are gonna give you 80% of the value. And so it is with managing innovation. Again, what we help with. There are things which are basic. And when we help customers, boy, do they get crazy and sophisticated and creative. And I so many times have to remind them, look, stick to the 20% that works, and that's going to give you 80% of the value. So that's what the white belt references to.
All right, so I'm guessing that probably intellectually resonates with people here, but like maybe just to make it a little bit more real, could you give like a couple examples of like some black belt techniques that you're sort of calling out here?
So I work with a customer and very sophisticated thinking, and let me see. It was a view of the portfolio. You know, again, you want to see all your initiatives and ideas in a nice graphical view, a dashboard. And boy, we got into this design of what this view would be, and we had a bubble chart, which again, is already sophisticated if you think about it, but it's okay. And we had an x-axis and a y-axis where we want to see their innovation initiatives. And bubbles, okay. So now you have 2 dimensions and the bubble, and the size of the bubble, okay, 3 dimensions. Of course, now the bubbles will have to have a color to signify something. So now we have up to 4-dimensional charts. And later, they say, well, let's do something. Actually, we want the bubbles to have a shape, which will be either a circle or a square or a hexagon or a triangle. You signify yet another dimension. I think we're up to 5 or 6. And yeah, but wait. Inside each shape, there was a pie slice to, again, show yet another value. So we are like a 7-dimensional chart, which, again, was intellectually very appealing, but useless for anybody at executive level who's going to make a decision. So this is kind of this black belt idea that it is so cool once you have the data, you can do this, but it's really useless. If I can add one more example, kind of related to that, the other experience I had is this high-tech company. This had to be engineers, so you understand this example. Again, or technology collects data, so people get excited about the data, and then we discuss how to measure the value of a new product initiative. And NPV, probably you've heard, comes around a lot, which already has some issues because NPV is kind of an abstract concept. You already packed revenue and cost and pack it together with a discount rate, and okay. No, but that wasn't enough. We wanted to take the NPV and divide it by the total addressable market, because that's going to give us the market value penetration or something to that effect. But wait, there's more. Right? That wasn't a good number. We need to risk adjust that so it's correct. So we have a risk-adjusted market value, value penetration, which meant nothing. All right. So this is, again, this black belt, very showy things that are not useful. All right.
Yeah, so I want to get to the other side of this, like the white belt side of this. But before we get there, like, so if we're thinking about these kind of black belt moves, these sort of super sophisticated models that you're talking about, I just want to make sure I'm clear on the argument you're making. And so I could interpret this one of two ways. One way is, okay, you start with these so-called white belt moves and then you progress to black belt moves. Or you could look at it as, you know, keep it simple for the long term. Like, what are you sort of advocating for here as people are thinking about kind of rolling these techniques out across their organization?
Yeah, it's almost like the argument sounds like, well, do the white belt moves, you know, take care of the 20%, and then when you're really comfortable and good with that, then do the sophisticated stuff. The truth is, no, because unless you have a business that never changes, correct, which is really a block of concrete, by the time you get to understand the new business, it'll be a different problem. So you need to understand the white belt moves, the 20% that works for that new business. So frankly, you always be improving your basics.
Okay, two more questions. I'd like to actually do these. First, can you give us some examples of white belt moves so we can just get a sense on that? And then I want to, after that, just so that you know kind of where we're heading, I'd like to then, after that, talk a little bit about if you're running an innovation group like this, what should you be doing to identify and sort of categorize the first two? But let's make sure we're clear on what white belt moves are. So could you give us some examples of that to get us started?
Yeah. Like somebody said, I think John did this morning, harder doesn't mean better, right? And again, we get very intellectual, we're in academia, I know that. Harder doesn't mean better. If something that you want to implement to manage your innovation, which is either hard to explain or hard to understand, is already wrong. And this is not, you know, making fun of executive level. Executive level are going to fund these decisions. So you don't want to confuse them. You put the data as close to the facts as you can. So any move that keeps you close to data that relates to the business, and that's what I say, NPVs, it's not good. Talk about revenue, talk about cost. You know, it's a good white belt move.
Okay, so let's just stop there for a minute. I want you to give it up, but just to stop there for a minute. So the contrast we're making there is for financial returns, right? You can do something like net present value, which many have heard me. There's a bunch of complaints I have with net present value, but which you got to be careful. We're in a business school. A lightning might strike in a minute on that. But there's a bunch of problems with net present value. But you're saying even beyond the fact that this may just not be the right kind of metric, just keeping it simple and saying, okay, here's the revenue projections, here's the size of the market, here's the cost to do it. That's the more white belt level of that. Is that right?
When you talk financials,
right.
But financials are not the only metric. So let's talk about scorecards, which I love. And one mistake is to choke a project or an idea too early when you start asking financials information of it. So it kind of goes to the paradox of information and freedom, right? Companies are risk adverse, and you know, if you have a very early baby, you can try to figure out what is the return on this. It's too early. Don't kill it yet with its questions. So scorecards are also a good white move. And scorecards is just simply a number, 1 to 7, 1 to 10, when you rate something, and it's good or bad. Rate the good things, you know, keep the good things with you and recount the bad things. One thing I will warn with scorecards is two things. You can also get very intellectually oriented with a scorecard and think like a 7.2 is higher than a 7. It's not. It's just a big number. So don't rank something like your concepts or initiatives and think like a 7.2 is better than a 7. It was a guideline. What I will say you should pay attention to is if you do a scorecard in multiple dimensions, and this typically will go like there's a concept you want to move forward, and you have a group of people to look into this, maybe using sticky notes or whatnot. But eventually, there is a scoring that happens where we will say, what is the technical feasibility of this? Do we have the capability to develop this in-house? Again, 1 to 10. Like, what do we think about that? Well, if those dimensions give you a result where everybody agrees, so everybody's a 1 or 2 or 3, then that's fine. You just move on. You don't even question that. If everybody agrees that it's a high probability we can develop this in-house, you move on. Where it gets really interesting is look at the places where people don't agree. So if you have any scoring, when you have people that are on one side and people, this is the one you want to pull out and have a discussion. And again, very simple technique. And when you uncover there is assumptions, because people usually are thinking differently because they're making a different assumption of what this is all about.
Yeah, it's one of the things I talk to kids a lot about here is the difference between a precise number and an accurate number, right? And I think your scorecard is a good example of that, right? Like, I can give you a very precise answer for something like a net present value,
Yep.
but it's probably not very accurate, right? And I think some of these white belt techniques are maybe driving more at accuracy as opposed to just precision
Yeah.
for the spirit of
Yeah,
precision.
it's a false sense of confidence because you have a 7.225. That doesn't mean it's correct. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, let's wrap with this. So we've got a lot of people here who also lead groups that do a lot of these things. And so if they're thinking through their innovation processes, what techniques or tips would you give them to say, okay, here's some ways to identify things that might be black belt, that maybe you want to think about simplifying. Here's some things that are good using this white belt, black belt analogy.
Yeah. Maybe not a technique, but a principle. And just a quick story. There was a customer we're implementing, again, this executive views to understand what is innovation landscape in the company. And as it happened, we had some design over what those visuals would be, and we loaded some test data, but it happened to be real projects that the company was running. We just wanted to show something that was kind of more or less realistic. And as it happens, one of the executives comes to this meeting and looks at the dashboard we're presenting. Oh, this looks good, interesting. By the way, is that Project X there? Yeah, that's Project X. I told this team to kill that project 6 months ago. How come we're still doing that? So the moral of the story is visibility is what you want to drive to. So whatever you do, whatever you pick for your metric, for visualizations, your job is to make things visible. That in itself is going to solve a ton of problems because that's going to drive decisions, that's going to show things out of kilter, and that's what you want to do. So try to measure less and show more. That's what I said.
That's awesome. I think it's a great note to end on. Peter, thank you so much for doing this again, and also kind of as the representative for Sophia in here, thanks for making us able to do this event as well. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
So to give you guys a little preview of where we're heading next, we met some of you last night, if you got in early enough, got a chance to see the Hack a Startup event that happened in the Schwartz Center upstairs. So as a reminder, this is a 2-week initiative. So students have had 2 weeks to work on their startup idea. We had 10 different teams present their startup ideas last night to a panel of judges. And the teams that finished first, second, and third are just going to give you their pitches quickly. Just as a reminder for everybody, these are 2-week-old startups. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about this, right? These are not startups that have been going for 2 years. These are 2 weeks. But I think they've made incredible progress in a couple of weeks. And I think it also starts to highlight some of the talent that we have at CMU. And then after that, just to give you a sense on what's coming right out that, we also want to have one other student team talk to you. They're actually not from Carnegie Mellon. They flew in from Colorado. They won our Optum case competition we did with Optum. So one of the things that I've come to believe as we've spent time in the corporate space over the last couple of years is that large companies like where many of you work are able to solve some really big societal problems that are just often too hairy for traditional startups to work on. And I really want to elevate that conversation, not just here at Carnegie Mellon, but across graduate programs across the US. And so with Optum, we sponsored a case competition where we asked graduate students from any different program to think about how an innovation could solve the problem of healthcare inequity. So if you think about lots of different demographics in the United States, whether it's urban versus rural, whether it's race, I mean, and even on some of these things like race, like it doesn't even matter income. If you just look at what happens with African American women delivering babies versus other demographics, like it's just I think it's safe to say we can all agree we can do better. And so we asked student teams to pick a demographic that was that basically didn't have equity in their care and come up with an innovation that could deliver equity to that group. We had 190 students from 50 different teams, universities across the United States come and compete from this. We had 4 of the 8 Ivy Leagues send teams, and the team from Colorado State ended up winning. They have an amazing project, which I won't steal their thunder on. But so the next 4 groups are student teams. We're going to have the 3 Hack a Startup teams, and then we'll have the winner of the case competition do it. I will tell you guys, just to preview something, most likely next year, the case competition will be the day before the CSL Forum, because what I would really love is that when all those students come, they stay for the forum, and what I'd really love is all of you to come early and see the case competition. And we're not going to just do health, although we will talk about health again. We're going to talk about equity in a couple of different areas. So that's a little preview of where we're heading. But with that, hopefully we're ready now for the... Great. So we're going to move to the Hack a Startup teams now, but thanks so much, everybody.